Sequencing, the magic of proper ordering. His first question, when we sat down to lunch was, when you go to pee in a restaurant urinal, do you wash your hands, before or after you pee? I was stunned. Afterwards, sir. He looked at me sourly. That's the wrong answer. You're a conventional thinker and not rational. I always wash before rather than after. Barton Biggs, investor in hedgehogging. My first visit to the American Kickboxing Academy to train with Dave Marlowe was memorable. Not because his technical abilities are amazing, which they are, and not because elite judoka fear him on the ground, and top jiu-jitsu players fear him on his feet, both true, but because his students were uniformly difficult to deal with. Sure, you have the UFC champions like King Velasquez and soon-to-be champions, who traveled to San Jose, California, from around the world to be engineered by the Marlowe machine and the magic touch of Javier Mendez. But I found the lesser mortals even more impressive. Blue belts, with far less experience than me, were throwing arm bars from angles I'd never seen and exhausting me from postures I couldn't break. At first, I assumed it was one or two standouts. No such luck. I began to spot patterns, first principles, that his disciples had wired into their DNA, like Marines reassembling guns blindfolded. The positions were the same, pressure was applied in the same places, and each input was paired with its desired output. The 230-pound guys weren't brute-forcing things like I expected. They were attempting to fine-tune in the same way that the 130-pound players had to. Something here was different. His students were infuriatingly reliable. In contrast, most world-famous black belts, often world-class athletes, teach a hodgepodge of random techniques. Daily classes are submissions due job that leave students to assemble the puzzle themselves. Some succeed, but the vast majority fail. At the very least, students plateau for months or years at a time. There is no system, no clear progression. Dave had what other coaches didn't, a logical sequence. The neglected fine art of sequencing. Stan Utley, a short game think, putting golf guru, explains the first distinction we'll make. Form refers to things like grip, stance, and balance. Sequence refers to the order the parts move in. A lot of times, people will think they have poor form, when in fact it's their sequencing that's off. Nowhere is this truer than in a fluid movement like swimming. Despite having grown up 5 minutes from the beach, I could never swim more than 2 laps in a pool. This was a lifelong embarrassment until I turned 31, when two catalysts changed everything. At the end of January 2008, a friend issued me a New Year's resolution challenge. He would go the rest of 2008 without coffee or stimulants if I trained and finished an open water 1-kilometer race that same year. That created stakes, which I'll explain in the next chapter. Months after this handshake agreement, after many failed swimming lessons and on the cusp of conceding defeat, a former non-swimmer, Chris Sacca, introduced me to total immersion T. You might recall this as Shinji Takeuchi's preferred method. Total immersion offered one thing no other method appeared to, just as Dave Marlowe differentiated himself, a well-designed progression. Each exercise built upon the previous, and failure points like kick modes were completely avoided. The first sessions might include kicking off a wall in 4 feet deep water, and practicing gliding in a streamlined position for 5, 10 feet, at which point you simply stand up. Practicing breathing came much, much later, and learners of T, by design, dodge the panic-inducing bullied when they most need to, in the beginning. The progression won't allow you to fail in the early stages. There is no stress. The skills are layered, one at a time, until you can swim on autopilot. In my first instructor-less workout, I cut my drag and water resistance at least 50%, swimming more laps than ever before. By the 4th workout, I had gone from 25+ strokes per 20-yard length to an average of 11 strokes per 20-yard length. In other words, I was covering more than twice the distance with the same number of strokes, expending less than half the effort. For the first time in my life, I felt better after leaving the pool than before getting in. Unbelievable. Within 10 days, I had gone from a 2-length 18.39 m 2x 20 yards maximum to swimming more than 40 lengths per workout in sets of 2 and 4. Several months later, having never met a coach, I drove to my childhood beach after a cup of coffee and a light breakfast. I calmly walked into the ocean, well past my former fear of death distance, and effortlessly swam just over 1 mile, roughly 1.8 kilometers parallel to the shore. I only stopped because I'd passed my distance landmark, a beachfront house. There was no fatigue, no panic, no fear, nothing but the electricity of doing something I thought impossible. I felt like Superman. That's exactly how I want you to feel with any skill you tackle, including cooking. The T freestyle stroke. Hotlines and mayonnaise, when simple ISNT simple. Let's learn a phone number. Start with this, 305-503-0846. Now, try it again with 267-436-5128, but simultaneously pat your head and rub your stomach while the friend lists off random numbers. Harder, right? This is an illustration of pushing working memory, which is taxed by tasks that require the gallery and active monitoring of information in the face of interfering processes and distractions. Think of it as your RAM. Too many applications at once and your computer freezes. This is where mayonnaise, a cookbook staple, is relevant. It's perfectly slow carb and I love this stuff, but it's problematic. Cookbooks introduce mayo with good intentions. Look how simple it is. You're making something you've always bought at the supermarket. Just imagine the possibilities. Now, if you rate difficulty based on number of ingredients, a chimpanzee could make mayo. 4 ingredients, eggs, olive oil, lemon juice, and a bit of salt. On paper, all is well. In practice, it goes more like the following. I put my novice thoughts in brackets. The bolded instructions are taken from a real recipe. Just add A, then a bit of B, but don't break the emulsion, whatever you do. What is an emulsion, and how do I avoid breaking it? But first of all, how on earth do I hold the bowl and whisk, while pouring something at the same time? Be sure to secure your bowl, ideally a heavy pot, lined with a damp dish towel. Lined. How and where? Add olive oil 1 drop at a time and continue. How do I pour 1 drop at a time out of a spout, especially while reading the next step? Adding roughly 1 C per 20 seconds. How do I time that? If it breaks, stop, do Y, then repeat steps L and M again, not too fast. I hate you, cookbook. If it's too thin, just add a splash. How much is a splash? Of water and mix again. Footnote, if that doesn't achieve the desired consistency, how do I know what that is? Add some Dijon mustard. What? Wish I'd known that beforehand. Our dear mayonnaise, treated like the ABCs in the first pages of many wonderful books, overloads our circuits with variable pacing, performing multiple new skills ambidextrously and simultaneously, and much more. It's an interference hailstorm. And so we learn a lesson. It's the burden on working memory that makes something easy or hard. No wonder so many people give up on cooking. You throw in the towel after asking, why bother trying if I can even handle the basics, the ABCs? The good news is that it's not your fault. You're being forced to do the cabs, and that makes no sense. It's time to reorder things. Kings and pawns, starting with the endgame first. I first met Josh Waitzkin at a coffee shop in Manhattan. Having just read his second book, The Art of Learning, I was as giddy as a schoolgirl at the prospect of meeting him. About 15 minutes into sipping coffee and getting acquainted, I was thrilled to realize that he dropped F-bombs as much as I did. He was no Rain Man, and I felt silly for half expecting him to be. If you've seen the movie Searching for Bobby Fischer, then you know of Josh. Wandering through Washington Square Park with his mom at age 6, he became fascinated with the blitz chess that the street hustlers played at warp speed. He watched and absorbed. Then he begged his mom to let him give it a shot. Just once. Soon thereafter, dressed in Oshkosh overalls, he was king of the hustlers. Labeled a prodigy, a term he dislikes, 25, Josh proceeded to dominate the world chess scene and become the only person to win the national primary, elementary, junior high school, senior high school, the United States cadet, and the United States junior closed chess championships before the age of 16. He could easily play simultaneously, in which 20, 50 chessboards were set up with opponents in a large banquet hall, requiring him to walk from table to table playing all of the games simultaneously in his head. Bruce Pandolfini, Josh's original chess teacher, started their first class by taking him in reverse. The board was empty, except for 3 pieces in an endgame scenario, king and pawn against king. Through the micro positions of reduced complexity, Josh was forced to learn the macro principles. He learned the power of empty space, opposition, and setting an opponent up for zugzwang opposition, where any move he makes will destroy his position. All from a near empty board. By limiting himself to a few simple pieces, he mastered something limitless, high-level concepts he could apply anytime against anyone. Josh explains further, most of my rivals, on the other hand, begin by studying opening variations. At first thought, it seems logical for a novice to study positions that he or she will see all the time at the outset of games. Why not begin from the beginning, especially if it leads to instant success? The answer is quicksand. Once you start with openings, there is no way out. Lifetimes can be spent memorizing and keeping up with the evolving encyclopedia of chess openings eco. They are an addiction, with perilous physiological effects. It is a little like developing the habit of stealing the test from your teacher's desk instead of learning how to do the math. You may pass the test, but you learn absolutely nothing, and, most critically, you don't gain an appreciation for the value or beauty of learning itself. Always relying on recipes is a lot like stealing the test from your teacher's desk. But if tackling a new skill, how might you uncover the key techniques and order them? Argentine Tango, a case study. After living my life in 15-minute outlook increments from 2000 to mid-2004, I decided to travel the world with no structure, no schedule, and no return date. The only plan was to go where the wind took me. One manual, a Panamanian I befriended in January 2005, acted as a gust of wind that would change my life. Argentina has the best wine in the world, the best steak, the most beautiful women, and you can live like a king for pennies on the dollar. And that's how I ended up in Buenos Aires in February, taking a tango class to escape the oppressive heat. Carolina, an assistant instructor, was my first tango partner and none too happy about it. She was 5'4", 23 years old, and dressed in what appeared to be no exaggeration a black latex catsuit. Imagine Catherine Zeta-Jones from Entrapment 2-6. Her opener was charming. Come on, I don't have all day. I have my own practice. Just grab me and let's get this over with. Looking at other men and imitating as best I could, I tentatively placed one hand in hers, and delicately wrapped my other forearm around her back. Not good enough. She spat out, as if I'd just taken a dump on the floor, and she threw her arms down in disgust. It knocked me off balance and almost forced my head to butter like a ram. Hands placed on her hips, she yelled over the music as an announcement to the group, "This guy's built like a goddamn mountain and he's grabbing me like a fucking Frenchman." Everyone broke into hysterical laughter. This lasted several minutes. Carolina then turned around to face me, expressionless. "Let's go. I still have to help the others." Humiliated and angry, my Spanish inadequate, I resorted to playground tactics. I crushed her. I had no master plan, besides squeezing her until her eyes popped out like a stressed doll or she let out a little yell. Instead, she looked up at me in slow motion. Her mouth broke into the first smile I'd seen. Now that's much, much better. 30 minutes later, I bought tickets for another 10 classes. Roughly 6 months later, I set a Guinness World Record in tango and made the semifinals of the World Championships. How? First, I started off backward, much like Josh did with chess. I looked at what some male pros did later in their careers. They learned the female role. I made it a point to do this at the beginning. Understanding the female follow first allowed me to subsequently learn an effective lead la marca much faster. It also forced me to focus on footwork, the equivalent of Josh's 3 pieces on the chessboard, through which I learned the macro principles, proper posture, foot position, weight shifting, etc. This seemingly reverse approach was actually common in the late 1800s, when man practicing with man was the norm. 2-7. Second, I did an inventory, separating implicit from explicit. As soon as I recruited Alicia Monti, later my teacher, to compete in the Buenos Aires World Tango Championships, 28, I began to collect and categorize tango video, much like George Carlin categorized his jokes and ideas. From Pedro Avellaneda to Miguel Angel Zotto, from black and white bootleg VHS to broadcast video of the World Championships, I went over tapes like a boxer researching the greats. What did the maestros have in common, and what did they rely on when the stakes were highest? Next, I met the greats in person, since most of them taught in Buenos Aires. I invited them to coffee, or went to their classes, and asked all of my usual questions. See deconstruction, what did they recommend I do or not do? There was clearly explicit expertise, what they told me to do, and implicit expertise, what they did under pressure, that they weren't aware of or couldn't verbalize. Third, I identified what I could become good at quickly if I leveraged past experience. Given my background in wrestling and breakdancing, were there facets of tango I could learn faster than other people? In short, I looked for the answers to 3 questions. 1. What are commonalities among the best competitors? 2. Which of these aren't being actively taught, i.e., implicit in most classes? 3. Which neglected skills? Answers to number 2 could I get good at abnormally quickly? The sweet spots were the places where all the answers overlap like the center of a Venn diagram. If you're competing against people with 20, 30 years of experience, and if you have 4 months to train for the Buenos Aires Championships, followed by a short 6, 8 weeks to train for the World Championships, you need to be surgically precise. I ended up focusing on 3 skills, ordered by margin of safety. 1. Large, elegant steps. 2. Creative pivots, especially when moving in straight lines. 3. Variable speed, using fast and slow movements together, particularly in sequences assumed to be exclusively fast. Then Alicia helped me choose, after many auditions and paid classes, one world-class teacher who could teach all 3 together, the inimitable wonderkind Gabriel Miss E. Loved by old veterans and avant-garde dancers alike, unheard of in the divisive world of tango, Gabriel offered 2 additional advantages. He judged competitions before, and he led primarily with his forearm, not his chest. Men who lead with their chests, the standard, need to develop incredible strength in their toes to maintain a strong forward lean. I didn't have time to develop a lot of attributes, so Gabriel was perfect, a pure technician. The entire process worked, and a similar sequence can work for you, whether you're training for a job interview or circuit du Soleil.